talk about homelessness now. I think it's a really important issue. Obviously, the Prince William, it's one of his very important causes. He is really optimistic that we can end homelessness. This is his great belief. Unfortunately, the public don't follow suit. They don't believe that it's actually possible. Now, William has actually said that no single organisation can help to end homelessness. Charities working together with others can help demonstrate it is not an inevitable part of life. Now, homelessness is a very complicated issue. It's very multifactorial, and the reason that people end up on the streets is really complicated. Plus, once you are on the streets, then trying to break that cycle, that vicious cycle, is so difficult. Also, huge medical problems associated with that, not least drink and drugs and all the rest of it, but actually also just looking after your health generally. Well, I'm delighted to say that Matthew Torbitt, who's a former Labour advisor who was himself previously homeless, joins me this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you very much indeed. I see a great deal of homelessness. We're seeing more and more of it. Lots of people sleeping rough on the streets, and in a civilised society, I would hope that is something you would not see anymore.
Yeah, you would all hope so, and I think I agree with Prince William. It can be done if the political will is there. I think we actually saw a little bit of that during COVID, during the Everybody In initiative. It shows that actually you can get everybody inside, you can get everybody housed. What the government would no doubt say back is that is very costly and short term because it's in hotels, it's in temporary accommodation. I agree. But that's also on you. We've had successive governments that haven't built enough housing, as we know. It's a nightmare to try and get anywhere on the ladder, particularly the social housing. We had, I think Margaret Thatcher's Right to Buy scheme was a good scheme. However, we didn't build enough. We built and sold 2 million. Since they were all sold, we've only built 1 million, so you've already got a shortfall. So there's a lack of social housing. There have been punitive welfare reforms during the coalition era, where people were falling foul of sanctions and end up on the street. And obviously there's also various personal reasons why people end up homeless. I ended up on the streets because of family breakdown. You have...
So can I just ask you about your story?
Yes.
You ended up homeless as a very young person.
Yeah, no, I was a teenager. I was the eldest of 4, and I always think the eldest is the trial child. Mum and dad are learning, the siblings always get it a little bit easier and stuff like that. And my mum and dad couldn't cope. I was a bit of a rebellious teenager. I wouldn't say I was any different from the norm, but me and my brother would fight like cat and dog, and they'd had enough by the end of it. So they asked me to leave the family home. I was kicked out.
How old were you?
I was 15.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was not ideal. So I slept on the streets of Manchester for 12 months.
I can't even comprehend that. So what, I mean, obviously you did so out of necessity. What was that like for you as a 15-year-old? I mean, I don't even know how you comprehend going about that.
Well, it's awful, obviously, to put it really bluntly. You don't speak to people for maybe up to a week. People ignore you. You feel dehumanised. You know, I don't like talking about it necessarily, but there is a very common experience of either being beaten up or urinated on. Yeah. You fall cold, you fall ill, you're in pain all the time, your joints are aching, and you don't sleep.
And how did you survive? About food, water, for example?
Well, the people of Manchester are very generous. There's an element of ignorance as well, where I'm writing a book about it at the moment, and there was an instance I always remember where a gentleman at 4 in the morning, I was bedding down for the night and thinking it was starting to get a little bit quiet towards the northern quarter, and he offered me half a kebab, which in one way is very sweet because he's gone, oh, do you know what, I don't want any more of this, I'm going to give it this fella here who's this kid really that's on the streets. But obviously the dehumanisation of the point of, well, I don't want half a kebab at 4 in the morning.
That you've half-eaten.
But he was so incensed that I'd be so ungrateful for not taking that. He threw it at me, he's foaming at the mouth, he's angry, he's obviously a little bit intoxicated as well. Yeah. But it's that they can't comprehend that, well, surely you'd eat anything if you're that desperate, and actually why should we be offering people on the streets just anything, or half-eaten food? So, no, from that I was groomed into a gang and sentenced to 12 months in prison. It's a bit like county lines, but wasn't drugs. I was essentially a bit of a runner, sent to do errands. They'd clothe you, you'd have a roof over your head, and it wasn't my proudest moment, but truth be told, I'd have done anything to put I'd have done anything to put a roof over my head. I was sick of it, I was fed up, I was traumatised. Now, the one thing that that enabled me to turn my life around. I wasn't sent to prison, it was a suspended sentence because it was a first-time offence. My best friend's mum and dad took me in, and what they offered me was opportunity, support, and ultimately education. My best friend's mum said, look, you're not a daft lad, go to college, get yourself some GCSEs, you'll be able to do an access course. They knew how to, what you could get from the system compared to my mum and dad. And they said, you know, go and get yourself a degree, you can do an access course for free, you're unemployed. So I went and did a degree and got political and ended up where I am today, basically.
I mean, amazing, and amazing from their point of view to offer you that opportunity as well. What was that like? A huge sense of relief, I assume? Yeah,
it was very weird. My family are very dysfunctional, lots of families are. And it was weird. I remember once, they made a real effort. I laugh with my best friend now. I said, I always remember that first night we sat round the table and had dinner. And we, you know, my mum and dad, very busy people, would sit and have dinner on our laps, or tea as we call it up north. And they'd put music on. I think they'd put Paolo Nutini on. It was this like something out of a film, really weird atmosphere.
Very
Josh
surreal.
Josh said, you know, we never normally do that. They did that for you to make you feel.
Lovely, isn't it?
No, exactly. And that's what Prince William talks about, the idea of housing first. And what housing first is, for those that don't know, is we currently have something where you must have treatment first. So in order for you to get into some level of accommodation or housing, you might have to get some level of support for counselling, mental health issues, kick the substance abuse, kick the alcohol. That's hard to do anyway, even harder if you're on the street. So what housing first is, you get immediate housing, permanent housing, but you get the wraparound care that comes with it, because you're not ready to just be on your own.
And are we talking about being in a centre, so for a one room, for example, in a kind of almost like a student accommodation? Is that kind of where he's going, or is he going towards...
No, it's housing.
Housing, so detached housing.
Yeah, and it happened, the idea was conceived in New York in the 90s. Finland took it on as a huge thing, and they have, homelessness as a whole has been cut by 50% since 2005. Rough sleeping is basically eradicated. They don't have rough sleeping in Finland anymore. And
you talk about the economics of this, and you say, well, it was very expensive to put people into hotels in the short term, but also it's very expensive and a lot of great people not to look after them and not to house them. So, in fact, the long-term economics do work in favour of making sure people have accommodation.
1,000,000%. If you look at temporary accommodation and the amount of families in temporary accommodation, we have nearly 200,000 children in temporary accommodation this Christmas. That costs £4 million a day.
That's a staggering number.
Ridiculous. £4 million a day in London alone.
But not only that, just the human cost of that.
Absolutely, and what traumatic effect that will have. Will these people come into contact with social services, the justice system? So I think the maths show that for every £1 you put into preventative measures, you get 7 to 10 back. And it looks costly on paper. You could wipe out homelessness, if Elon Musk is willing to be generous, £20 billion it will cost to eradicate almost all homelessness in the UK. Sounds a lot of money. Reoffending costs the Home Office £20 billion, and the amount of pipeline between prison and homelessness is there. It's a lot more healthier to be in a house.
So you talked about the need for housing. Of course, the government and successive governments, actually, of all colours, have failed spectacularly to build those houses. 1.5 million over 5 years, 300,000 a year. What is needed here? Is it a cross-party commitment to do this, to end homelessness, so it is depoliticised?
Yeah, that's almost what Finland did, and I think we need to see that from all parties. I think there also needs to be cross-governmental involvement. So it's all well and good Angela Rayner in the housing department saying, right, we're going to take this on, where Streeting needs to get involved from a health benefit point 100%. Of view, and the amount of money that would be saved on the health service from people being in accommodation rather than at on the streets. The justice system, Shabana Mahmood needs to get involved, the Treasury needs to get involved from a prevention and funding point of view. But yeah, they depoliticised it. They said this is something we're going to do, and over 20 years they eradicated it. It's an amazing thing.
So just in terms of where we are, and obviously having Prince William on board is amazing because he's a great advocate of this, and of course he's someone that people listen to. How optimistic are you that this will be solved, that people will come together, that there is the political will to do that?
I have to be, otherwise I'd give up. We might as well give up tomorrow if we're not going to try. And I do fully, I'm not naive, I've lived it, I've seen it, I hear it all the time. I am adamant that we can end this together, and I'd be willing to work with Prince William or anybody else that wants to do this, because I really do think it can be done. And I don't want anybody, if possible, to ever go through what I had to go through.
Can I just ask you, on a personal note, now that you have come out of the other side of it, and now you're obviously very successful and
won't go that far.
well, you are. I mean, you're a great spokesperson. You're doing some other media today as well, and you're obviously very passionate about it. Has it made you the person you are, do you think? Have you learned from your experience?
Yeah, totally. I think I got asked the other week about battles and whatever, and personal battles, and I think if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And I think through life, you have to take every negative and turn it into a positive. And I think it's a bit like when people lose somebody and they set up a charity, you use that to fuel you and go, right, okay. And that's why I went into politics. I thought, I want to stop kids like me ending up in that same position, kids where I'm from, kids on estates, kids that fall into the wrong crowds. I want to try and cut off them pathways that they'd be tempted to go down, and we have a country that's fit for the future, essentially.
Well, I look forward to you being Secretary of State for Housing in the future. Thank you so much for coming in and telling us your story. That's Matthew Torbitt, their former Labour advisor, was previously homeless himself, and very optimistic that we can actually solve homelessness once and for all. And of course, don't walk past someone just lying on the road, please, this Christmas. We can do it when we want to do it, can't we? We did it in COVID, so let's do that again. Thank you.